Hey guys, I'm back here for another update and thank you video. So this week we've been working on researching more about the book, the Tupelo, and our family's background down there. Now this week we've been looking at different counties because what I want to do is I want to start where Rosella Presley first came to Tupelo. My oldest relative on record from the McKinneys, Mary McKinney, she was born into slavery in 1830. Her and two of her brothers that we knew about so far from the research, which is one of my grandpa Carl's great uncles, lived there right after the Civil War, came down there, and that's where they set up camp at. And we also found some McKinneys in, say it's Itawamba County, and Itawamba County is Fulton, Mississippi, where Rosella Presley lived. So far I actually have found a lot of McKinney farms and Gates residences in Fulton, Mississippi also. The interesting thing, though, when I was talking to someone about this, another researcher, they said that the country superstar from the 1970s, Tammy Wynette, was born in Fulton, Mississippi. And I said, well, what year? 1942. What year was your aunt born, the oldest one living? 1942. I'm like, did she live in Tupelo? They said, yes. Did she ever meet Elvis? Well, no, not exactly. But then I thought to myself, well, it's so little down there, she would have to know the Smiths, the Manzels, the Lloyd. She had to know our family too, because as small as those counties are, she was really familiar with that type of sound and the Smiths and Presley's presence in town, because they were a really big family still down there when I'm looking at it. So I was completely shocked that my great grandfather established some farms there and had a couple of residences when her parents lived there in the 1940s. So right now what I have been doing is I went down to a local record store, Vintage Vinyl in St. Louis. I asked the manager, I said, did you know anything about Tammy Wynette? Did you know how big she was of a superstar? He mentioned her. She was sort of like Barbara Manzell or something like that. I don't know who Barbara Manzell is, but hey, it was a brand new experience. So I said, just give me a record. And he gave me this really interesting record that I thought that was real interesting. It was a little bit different than from what I'm used to hearing, because usually a lot of stuff I listen to is a little bit more like R&B, upbeat pop type of stuff. But it's actually this record that he had given me, and this is her 1981 album. And the manager from there said that the 1981 album, she had kind of went through a little bit of a down period, but he said throughout most of the 70s she had like a lot of big pop songs and R&B songs. And he also mentioned that she did work in farming, and she also picked cotton like every other kid in Tupelo. And so I'm sure she's out there with all the farm kids picking cotton. And I thought that was actually really interesting, that she came from that kind of Pentecostal background, just like our family. Pentecostal background, knew how to sing, praise. I watched a couple clips on her, and she definitely was a Pentecostal person, like my great grandparents in person. So I'm going to learn a lot more about Tammy Wynette. So far, I've found one neighborhood in 1920 where we lived on one farm. A couple of my relatives, and they had a big boarding house. And then a couple of the farm right next over, her family had a boarding house as well, because I guess it's more like farmland, 10 miles east of Tupelo. And so her parents, I guess her dad's last name was on that list, and I looked it up and it was her dad. But this has been a while back. So right now I'm just trying to find different connections in town, and I'm pretty sure I should find something really soon. I'm reaching out to my family to see if they knew any of Tammy Wynette's family, because I'm sure they probably actually really do. I saw at least in the 1940 census at least 5 different residences in Itawamba County from our family, from all the sides of my family. Also, right now, we're doing pretty good on the research. What we decided to do is to start in Fulton County, because I think it's interesting to delve back into how found the connection between my grandparents and my great-grandparents in Tupelo and the Elvis, family and all that fanfare, but getting to know the Smiths and farming next to the Smiths. I actually kind of found it with the help of like Roy Turner, actually, in Black Lives Matter to Elvis, the St. Louis Public Library, and Walk with History's podcast. It's like 4 different people, the Indian heritage. And I know in the last Smith video, Bill Smith mentioned something about the Cherokee heritage. Well, originally, about 6 months ago, I kept saying my great-great-grandfather's name and my great-grandfather's name all over the place on Sotillo Road in Guntown in the 1930s. And I saw my grandpa's name. I'm thinking, man, there are Smiths, but I don't know how to connect them because they had these different states. Well, 2 of the states actually connected. And so I realized that they lived next door to him, because it didn't say it. I was thinking, oh, they all lived in Mississippi. And the funny part was I was counting it from like today's time. I wasn't counting it from like 1930. So I'm thinking, okay, well, there's no George Smith born in 1952. And I was like, it's 1852, not 1952. So once I settled that, got that down, then I started realizing we did live next door to them on Satilla Road in 30s in a couple of different residences, and the Presleys as well in town. And some of the cousins out towards the Belden area in the 1930s, uh, from what I knew. And so I decided to just focus in at the beginning of the book on just that Cherokee heritage, how what happened in my family's history after the Civil War. Theirs. I actually think it's really interesting now that I've carved it out. I think it's interesting that you had a lot of single moms, like in their family or our family, go there after the Civil War, slavery, and Indian tribes, because they had multiple different family members with different backgrounds, kind of like ours, just go and start up a farming community. And then that's where I'm just going to start my book at. I think it's more interesting in a history sense. One book that I would recommend that I really enjoyed from a history perspective was The Diary of a Confederate Daughter. It was written in a very easy manner, and it's an audio tape on book, so you can easily listen to it like a little movie. I listened to it in my counting department, and I thought it was pretty good. It kind of told more of like the Confederate side of the anger and the anguish, and then I kind of realized everybody was emotional. You know, the black people, my family, they were emotional. The Confederate soldiers, they were emotional. But then they also have family members fighting for the Union too historically. So it's kind of interesting to kind of realize and research my background and say, oh wow, okay, so now it kind of gives you a clearer sense of why they would go down there and everybody wants to start a new life. So that's really what I'm looking at right now. I did get two recommendations as well from another record store in St. Louis. Now, this other record store owner grew up about, it's like 50 miles outside of Tupelo, Mississippi, and he's around his early 80s. And he suggested, I said, well, I need to know more about Elvis's music. I'm writing a book. You're from that area. Give me two more recommendations so I can kind of get to know him a little bit better. And he suggested that I check out this lady named, her name was Barbara Fairchild. And this is her 1976 LP called Mississippi. And Barbara Fairchild's big book or big song was a song called the Teddy Bear Song. They said in like 1972. And it was interesting. It was kind of like a cheesy version like the Coat of Many Colors or a Dolly Parton song, in my home for winter or Christmas shoes. But overall, this album was interesting. She does a good job of mixing R&B ballads with a little bit of country and blues influence. So it's not twangy, but it's good. She's got some good like R&B soul kind of music on here. I was a little surprised. I'm like, okay, wow, it's kind of like more like an Elvis influence. That's interesting because you can kind of hear the gospel sound with the country sound, a little bit of the blues sound. The second one that he suggested was this man named Johnny Tillotson. Now, he's got a huge section of 50s and 60s rock. And he said that this was a good one that they had kind of patterned Elvis off of. Or it's a good person to learn about. So I said, okay, let me take a look at this. And I was really surprised. I actually really enjoyed this album. He has a really cool, like, rock sound. One thing that he does do that I think was kind of interesting is that he does sort of not appropriate, but he takes black music and then he kind of makes it into like 60s pop. So, Willow Tree, I found out was like an old folk hymn. Take This Hammer was an old gospel song. I know, at Deliverance Temple, my parents' little church or something like that, you could definitely hear that, like, take this hammer, and it gets into like a gospel beat. Um, Yellow Bird kind of sounds like an old, Southern story. And so this album was made, I think it was like in the mid 1960s, but I really enjoyed this and kind of got a little bit more of like, what Elvis was kind of doing or, kind of his influence on the current pop music in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I said, can you give me some artists that might be good to kind of get to know Elvis a little bit more? And those were the two artists that I had. Anyway, I'm going to go. I got a lot more research to do and a lot more work. I'm looking for a new car and all kinds of stuff this week. So thanks for all your guys' help, and we'll update and be updating all the week. Oh, and thank you to ElvisHistory.com for retweeting us in Elvis EP. Thank you for liking all of our stuff. Elvis Birthplace Museum. Everybody's been great this week. We've got a lot of thank yous and a lot of support behind the scenes. You may not always see it. And to the Smith family and the Presley family as well. I always love your guys' videos, and they're so family friendly. So Have a good week, guys. Bye.